Welcome to Veteran Resource Podcast, where you will meet nonprofit organizations focused on improving the lives of veterans and their family members. Here is your host, Jeremy Caris.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 58 of the Veteran Resource Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Paris, and today we've got the very first Thought Leader Thursday, and I couldn't think of a better person to start with. Caris is going to be on the show today, and it was a really incredible interview that I did with him. This is somebody that was in the military, suffering from PTSD when he got out. He ran onto some dark times and used yoga to pull himself out of it. He didn't just survive, he thrived from that point forward. He is now teaching yoga with Exalted Warrior Foundation, providing adaptive yoga to veterans who are struggling just like he is. Yoga for him isn't just a class in a studio, it's a tool for every moment in his life to battle the physical and mental challenges he still faces every day. And I'm not going to talk too much here because I really want to dive into this interview and let you hear everything from Nick. And I'll talk to you on the back end afterward. Nicholas, welcome to the Veteran Resource Podcast. How you doing today?
Doing good, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This is not gonna be your normal average episode. This is the first time we're really doing this, where we're doing an interview and getting kind of a personal story, just to try to add more value to the podcast. And I'm told that you have quite an interesting backstory that I can't wait to get into. And I was plugged in with Blaine from Team Red, White, and Blue. And as it stands right now, I'm actually missing a Team Red, White, and Blue run for this interview. I got my run in earlier today, and I ran by Mark, who was running. He runs the route first, just prepping for it, and then he runs it again with everybody. So we saw him out there running when I was doing my run before this interview, and so I'm plugged in with Team Red, White, and Blue as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of hard chargers and motivators out there that love doing that stuff.
Absolutely. So let's hear a little bit about your backstory. Tell me about before the military. Who were you before the military?
I say it was a long time ago, but it really wasn't. And it was 10 years ago that I was just turned 18. So, but I grew up in a really, really small country town. Grew up with not a lot of money. Worked on farms my whole life, and my area where I grew up in was super big on wrestling. So I wrestled from the time I was in kindergarten until I graduated high school.
Oh, wow.
And about the time that I was into wrestling, when I was a little kid, that awesome Marine Corps commercial came on when he's like slaying the dragon, and I'm a 5-year-old, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And I was like, I want to be a Marine.
That early, huh?
Yeah. So I just, spent my life preparing physically and mentally to be a Marine. And it was a lot of work. I was always working out, swimming, biking, running, wrestling, obviously, and working on as much as I could on the farms and the gym. I was into the gym in like 6th grade. I was hitting the weight room.
Wow. But all of this was for that goal of getting into the Marine Corps, huh?
Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
There was the minor goals of being successful where I was, in my wrestling career and obviously education. But, all I wanted to do was do as much as I could to prepare myself for the Marine Corps. And I thought I did a pretty good job of that.
And you went in when you were 17, is that right?
No, I was actually 18 when
18?
I went in.
Okay.
But I signed the contract like on my 17th birthday.
Gotcha. Oh, wow. On your 17th birthday.
It was my birthday present that I asked for, was for my parents to come sign their names next to mine at the recruiting station. So
Wow. Yeah. I also had to have my mom go in and sign. I went in when I was 17, right out of high school. But I figured out that I wanted to go in the Army, I think a week before I went and signed up. And it wasn't a lifetime goal like you.
Yeah, it was funny because I was like, I'm gonna do 20 years, like that's all I want to do, and and you're doing all these like career things through high school, like figuring out what you want to do, and I did them, but didn't really pay any attention to them, and most of them always told me to be a mechanic or something like that, and but of course I went the infantry route in the Marine Corps.
Oh, wow. And so let's talk about that a little bit. Everybody seems to have a different story in the military. What was life like for you once you got in?
Well, I bounced around for a little bit. I started off with a B billet right off the bat and did like 8 months of security forces. And I really got tired of that before my even B billet was up. So I had made friends with the S department and luckily got my orders transferred over to the infantry. So I actually got to spend 4 years in the infantry. So
Hmm.
yeah, it was interesting. When I showed up to my unit, I was technically a boot, but not really a boot because I had been in the fleet. If Marines out there kind of know what I'm talking about, and a lot of them bash security forces. But when I was there, I made an underage drinking mistake and I got NJP'd, and I didn't like the way that I was treated there. And my cousin, who was also in the infantry, 3-6 at the time, was like, dude, you just need to request a transfer and get here because things are just done a lot different and you're not even part of the real Marine Corps, right? That's how everybody looks at security forces. So, of course I was, okay, well, if I'm not part of the real Marine Corps, I need to be part of the real Marine Corps, and requested my transfer. So, it was a beginning of my first year in the Marine Corps was very interesting and a lot of travel and I guess you could say a lot of administrative hardships, if you will.
Wasn't exactly what you were picturing all those years growing up?
No, and where I was, the loyalty amongst Marines wasn't as what I remember it to be when I was in boot camp and SOI. Like the individual Marines there just were a lot different. They had a different mentality about themselves with where they were in the Marine Corps, and I didn't fit in very well. So, that's why I got back to my roots in the infantry.
Gotcha. And so when you were in the infantry, you ended up deploying?
I did. Right off the bat, we went to Ramadi, Iraq, and it wasn't too bad there. It was a nice first deployment. I mean, we lived in for lack of a better word, it was a really third world country power plant.
Oh, wow.
That's where we lived at, and it wasn't very very pleasant. Our shower dripped water. It was terrible. And all we did was stand post all the time, and we ran the VCP, and then what later became the what do they call it? We just became like an observatory for the VCP and let the Iraqi police take over. But we still stood the post and were down in the lanes assisting the Iraqi police and searching the cars and everything. So it wasn't terrible, and that lasted about half the deployment, and then we just spent the rest of the time doing convoys all over Iraq. And yeah, I was a turret gunner. I was a 249 gunner, so yeah, I was in a turret, and we rode around forever. There were times that I wanted to go to sleep. It's like, those long drives when you just wish you could just go to sleep.
Yeah, the hum is just kind of putting you out.
Yeah, it was like that. And when we still had some IED threats, and at that same time is when they came out with the sweet little parachute IED.
Mm.
So I was like, it was tough because at the same time there wasn't much going on. At the same time, there was still such of a high threat. It was just a matter of when and where they wanted to, make their move. But so it was just one of those just always waiting, always anticipating something to happen scenario, and it never doing. So it was just mentally exhausting the entire time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so at this point, were you still thinking you were going to be in for 20 years, or were you already looking out?
I mean, I love the Marine Corps. Still was thinking about, going 20. And we came home and it was a good experience. And at that point in time, it had some difficulties with a marriage and ended up getting divorced a couple months after I got back from that deployment. But I still was gung ho for the Marine Corps, as most Marines will tell you they were.
Yeah. So what ended up changing that for you?
Well, we did our second deployment almost immediately after we came back from Iraq, and that was just a little 3-month little MEU down to South America, and we kind of used it as a training opportunity too because we knew we were going to Afghanistan in the summer. So we did a lot of training. We did a lot of McMap. We did a lot of shooting. We did a lot of range time in Cuba, and we were supporting the DEA and a bunch of other special ops forces on our ship, and we were just the company of Marines there just in case they needed us. And and then obviously 6 more months of training after that, and then we went to Afghanistan, and that was right when we were in Afghanistan was when I hit my 4th year mark, and I had 1 year left. And so then in the midst of the deployment, it was, okay, do I sign for another 4 years? Do I wait? And a lot of stuff was going on. We were in Helmand province, and we were living in PB McKinley, and we had the Blue School, and then later on we built PB Garrett, all north of Marjah in the Ring Canal. And it was tough. I mean, we were getting shot at about 90% of the time, 3 times a day, every day for the 6 months we were there. It was a lot. Even where we lived every night was getting shot at from this tree line. We were getting ambushed where we lived. They never, really hurt any of us where we lived because they had to be so far away, but they were always shooting rockets, and they would miraculously fly over our posts that weren't much but like 2 sandbags stacked high on our roof, because if you put more, the roof would cave in. It was just it was a scary time. I look back and there was a lot of good, fun memories while we were there, but there was a lot of very scary and obviously devastating moments throughout that deployment. And on the way back, I was like, I don't think I want to go on another deployment. I think we say in the Marine Corps that Marines have expiration dates, and you never know when your expiration date is until it gets there, and then then you got to make a choice. And I was sitting there thinking, can I be better than the 18-year-old that walks right behind me? Can I be faster than him? Can I be stronger than him? Can I carry more weight than him? Is my body healthier than his? And can I lead him effectively into combat? And after that deployment, I was just so beat up and tired. I know I was only 23, but I was just like, I know that there's other people out there that are stronger and better than me that can do this a lot better than I can. And I chose to take my expiration date.
And so when you were getting out there, did you already have a plan for what you were going to be doing after you got out, or it just came, like, okay, I decided I'm getting out, but you
I
had no
had
path forward at that point?
no plan. I had taken some EMT courses in high school, and I had taken some security guard classes in Ohio. Um, but I didn't want to move back there, uh,
Yeah.
obviously. So,
I'm from Buffalo
luckily,
and I stayed in Maryland, so I know how you feel.
my uncle, who had an extra room in his house, and um, always sent me the best care packages of, tobacco products, and sometimes there was a little bottle of whiskey in there or whatever. But he invited me into his home, um, when I got out of the Marine Corps, and that was a lot better choice than either Oklahoma with my brother or back in Ohio. So
Yeah.
I moved down here to Tampa, Florida. And that's where I've been ever since.
I absolutely love it down there. Love Tampa.
Yeah, Blaine was telling me how excited you were to come down and hang out.
Yeah, I got to get down there again. Absolutely. So when you were transitioning out, take me to that time. You're already out of the Marine Corps and you're down in Tampa. What was life for you like at that point?
Well, I was 23 and a Marine that just left service. So my uncle lived just down the street from, I don't know, 20 bars. So I was terrible, but I was drinking like every night out at the bars. And I did that for a long time. And
Were you
yeah, and
drinking
then
with people or just kind
yeah,
of?
I mean, well, sometimes it's by myself, but I got to know all the bartenders and I got to know all the bouncers. And then for a little while, I actually did security for one of the bars down
Hmm.
the street on like a couple nights a week because they needed somebody there, and it was a really chill bar. There was never any fights, so I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come hang out and check IDs, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I was a terrible mess. I didn't realize it at first, but in between all these drinking, I was going to the VA for all these appointments, and I had to quit running because I was getting this numbing like pain, and I didn't have any strength in my left foot. And so I thought it was an ankle problem. Turns out I had an L1 compression fracture in my back,
Hmm.
tons of arthritis in my spine. I mean, it was to the point where I couldn't even put on a sock onto my foot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like you're just so tight and everything's just so compressed that you couldn't even like put a sock on my foot. So I just I lived in Florida, so I just wore flip flops all the time. But, um, it was crazy. I was, volunteering for Team Red, White, and Blue, but still at the same time living this total like double lifestyle of I was, helping veterans, but at the same time I wasn't helping myself. I was just continuing to drink crazily and treat my body like crap. And luckily, I in the midst of all this with Team Red, White, and Blue, and I had met Blaine. And I was the one of the first volunteers for the Tampa chapter down here, and became like technically the social director because I couldn't do anything physical and didn't want to. Um,
Wow.
and
So
yeah,
were you on pain medications from the VA at that point?
yeah. It was a medicine cabinet full of them, lidocaine creams. That went along with this really like heat stuff. I was having back spasms like crazy, so I had those electrode things all the time on my back, and I would walk around with those. And I had fish oils. I had arthritis medication. I had Trifexis, or not Trifexis. Was that there's a one that starts with a T. I can't even remember now, but it was just I didn't want to take any narcotics because I'm like, I'm already drinking a
Yeah.
ton. I don't need to be addicted to narcotics, right? So I asked the doctor just for just on-demand pain pills that weren't a narcotic that would just take the edge off, and that's what he gave me. And I even had muscle relaxers and sleeping pills because I couldn't sleep. And yeah, like you wake up that one day, you're 23 years old, and you got like a medicine cabinet full of prescription drugs. You're like, okay, there's something's wrong. You got
Yeah.
to change something here. And
And so, wait,
yeah,
you mentioned that you were already volunteering with Team Red, White, and Blue at this point. You're already hanging out there, but you weren't able to really do any of the physical things with them, but you were just kind of helping out with the social side of things.
yeah. I mean, at the start, I was, it was like 2 months where I was like able to like run, and Blaine had done this. He would go was it Wednesday night? I think it was. He would do this run in the park, and I didn't make it every week, but I would go, and I had met Blaine through other sources, so me and him hung out outside of Team Red, White, and Blue as well, and then his friends, and we all just became a big group of friends at the start of it, and still today it's kind of like that. It's just now the group of friends is just a lot bigger.
A lot bigger, yeah.
Yeah.
And you got a pretty cool clubhouse too.
Yeah, the clubhouse is awesome. We like it.
Very cool. So yeah, I was going to get to that with Team Red, White, and Blue, like how you found out about them, if you were told about them when you were transitioning out, or if you were told about any organizations for that matter, when you were getting out.
No, again, just I met Blaine at a local coffee shop, just like I met my yoga teacher, and yeah, that's how I met Blaine. And he found out I was a veteran, and just like Annie was like, hey, come do this with me. And Annie, when she would see me in the coffee shops, be like, hey, come do yoga. And a lot of times I was just like, no, I got other stuff going on. Really, the other stuff was I was drinking, and at the same time going to college. So
But you didn't let any of them know that you were drinking at the time? You were just kind of...
I mean, they knew I was,
Yeah.
drinking. I mean, we would all go out, and I guess I was never the type that was like walking around with a flask and making it completely obvious
Gotcha.
that I was like, and I didn't think I was an alcoholic. I was self-medicating myself,
Yeah.
because I'd rather drink alcohol than take a pain pill. And it always just, I don't know, for some reason in my head, it just made more sense to drink over taking a pain pill.
Yeah. Take me to a time where it was your darkest days, and kind of walk me through the pinnacle of where you felt things were going wrong.
Yeah, I mean, the darkest days was all kind of like right around that time, right when I found out I couldn't run, because I was big into fitness and I was big into running, and I had met a lot of my friends through like all these different running clubs that they had down here. My first like 3-4 months down here, and then all of a sudden now I can't run, and so then I was drinking a lot, and I couldn't exercise. So then I was gaining a little bit of weight. At the same time, I was still trying to go to the gym, but it wasn't as I loved running. I loved how it made me feel, and that was like super depressing to not have that escape, that I don't know, that almost meditative aspect of my life was running. And I would run 5 miles a day, so it was like super crushing. So then I just drank more, and that didn't help anything. And I was going to the VA and going through all these different tests to figure out what was going on. And I went to my doctor, sent me to a PTSD evaluation. And, so because I wouldn't volunteer myself. I'm not just that type of person, right? So I went there, and I really had a terrible experience. I was talking to this lady, and the entire time, like, she just said, keep talking, and then she would just stare at a computer and type, right? And at the end of it, after going through like all the stuff that I'd been through and all of my things that I've been holding on to, right? She was like, I think you have an alcohol problem. I'm going to send you to an alcohol evaluation. And I was like, well, you're going to continue to see me for this issue? And she's like, well, we'll see after your alcohol evaluation. And so literally like 2 days later, I went to an alcohol evaluation, and that lady was like super kind and very attentive. And she's like, I don't think you have an alcohol problem. She's like, I think you're fine. And literally all treatment for mental health stopped there. I was like,
wow.
Like nothing. I never got another appointment for post-traumatic stress disorder. I talked to my doctor. I sent emails to, and just nothing ever happened.
Wow.
And,
did you feel like you might have PTSD?
Well, yeah, I'm pretty positive I still do, even though, because it's really funny because it's in my disability that I have post-traumatic stress disorder, but they wouldn't see me for treatment.
That's incredible.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
I mean, today a whole different story. I'm completely in control of my symptoms, and I'm golden with that, and I could potentially talk to somebody, but I think doing what I'm doing is just as good as talking to somebody.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, those were my real dark days. It was very demoralizing and depressing, and there were many nights that you sat on the back porch with a drink in your hand and a 45 in the other, and just waited for the right moment.
Really?
And
you were that's where you were, huh?
That's where I was.
Uh-huh.
Probably 5 nights a week at least, I would say. The only time I wasn't doing that is when I was out with friends or something. I guess putting all of that aside and enjoying the moment. But when I was just sitting at home, and I was just drinking by myself, yeah, that's where I would find myself at 3-4 in the morning, would be, yeah, out there.
Wow.
So.
Wow. And so you were physically sitting with a 45 in your hand.
Yeah.
Not just figuratively. You were.
Yeah. No.
Wow.
No. Physically, like, and I had a concealed carry, so I pretty much always carried my gun around anyway, and then it would just be, right there, and it was always loaded, one in the chamber all the time. It was just one hand in one, and then it was tough. It was a very dark time. I'm glad I never had the courage to pull the trigger, but I do remember a couple close calls for sure.
Tell me what your turning point was.
Well, at this point in time, we kind of go back into the coffee shop and meeting Annie and Blaine. I did my first yoga class like the week that I'd come out of the Marine Corps, and I was like, I am never doing that again. This is ridiculous. It was Bikram yoga. Everybody knows what that is. It's 24
I tried it once.
Same postures. Like, it's exhausting. 90 minutes and 110 degrees. It's terrible. I was like, I'm never doing this again. This is ridiculous, right? Well, she was like, well, come. She just kept encouraging me to come to some of her less intensive classes, the community adaptive class that she has for veterans at the studio. So occasionally I started popping in and out of there, right? And so I really started to kind of dig it a little bit, but I didn't let anybody know that I was digging it.
Yeah, you're kind of a big guy.
Yeah. But Blaine, they were doing this yoga camp in Chicago, and of course it had to be a Bikram yoga camp right in Chicago. But he's like, hey, would you like to go? They do this whole leadership development and, incorporated with a physical aspect of a camp. So I was like, sure, I'll go. And so he sent me up there. And so I hanging out with Annie every day, I actually learned a lot more about yoga than I knew about yoga. And people was talking to other veterans that were there, and I actually had a lot of answers for them about, yoga practice. And I can't remember any particulars, but I did it was 3 days of Bikram yoga. It was great. I got to hang out with lots of different veterans and different demographics, and we had a fabulous time. I got to meet some really cool yogis that offered their space up for the camp, and at the end of it, I'm flying back, and I didn't have a choice in my ticket. They were donated by Southwest, so I get a ticket and I get a seat, and of course this one's like all the way in the back, like in the middle seat next to the toilet, right? And I'm like, great. So it's like I don't mind being in the back of the plane, but the middle seat,
right?
I hope that nobody sits next to me so I can scoot over or something. Sure enough, the plane is packed with people, right? Just terribly packed. And I get all the way in, and there's this, God bless her, some old lady who's overweight and just kind of like melting into my seat a little bit, and you're like, hi, excuse me, I need to sit here. So she wiggles a little bit and I sit down, and then next thing you know, this 6'5", like huge black dude just comes and sits down next to me on the other side. And I'm like, my hands are across my chest, grabbing each shoulders, my knees are together. Like, I am just so squished and uncomfortable, right? I'm like in the back of the plane, there's no escape. And my anxiety is like going through the roof, like in my head, right? At the same time, like, I didn't have this like urge to like do an outburst, like randomly, in the past I'd be somewhere and then all of a sudden I would just lose it in anger and yell at people and freak out and throw stuff. And I was like thinking that this is going to happen. I'm like, I'm going to jail. Like, I'm not making it off this flight. And, sure enough, 2.5 hours later, I landed in Tampa, and I was still sitting like that, like knees together, like arms on the shoulders, like across, over my chest, because I didn't have anywhere to go. And yeah, I got off the plane and I was like, like sitting there later having a drink at the house, and I was like, holy crap, why didn't I freak out? And I was like, yoga, huh? Who would have thought? Right? Maybe it's yoga that this reason I was like able to like keep my calm and control myself, even subconsciously control myself without me even knowing it, Everything in my body and my brain was saying freak out and lose your stuff, right? And yet at the same time I was able to just sit there peacefully. And that was an eye-opening experience. Like, that was okay. I did yoga, and then I got put immediately into a really high anxiety, stressful situation. And
yeah, that's the universe kind of just, putting these things in front of you to show you.
Yeah, it was truly a great experience, and that's what kickstarted it. So, as you know, with Team Red, White, and Blue, when you go to one of these camps, they want you to they teach you leadership, aspects, and they want you to bring some of it back to your community, right? So what did I do? I started a weekly yoga class on top of what Annie and Exalted Warrior was already doing. She was doing the twice a month community adaptive class, and she was bringing veterans in from the VA anytime they wanted to take a yoga class for free. Well, I wanted more of a routine. So I was like, hey, let's do a weekly yoga class. We'll just call it Team Red, White, and Blue Yoga. It doesn't need to be specific, but it needs to be designed maybe to open people's eyes to different types of yoga that are out there, right? Because I, experienced just one thing of yoga, and then I hated it, right? So what if we give people the opportunity to experience different styles of yoga, and then also have, your knowledge of being able to modify all these postures to fit their needs. And so it became a thing like 3.5 years ago, and we've been doing it ever since.
Wow.
Every Sunday. Team Honorably Yoga.
That's incredible. So
Yeah.
the person who is kind of dragged into yoga, kicking and screaming, ends up starting a yoga class.
Yeah. Yeah. It even goes even crazier into that because, now I'm a yoga teacher. So,
Wow.
yeah. So, I did that for, I don't know, it was probably close to a year. And then, Annie, being the loving yogi that she is, talked me into going to yoga teacher training. And this was like not just like your typical 2-week long everyday yoga teacher training. This was a 8-month long yoga teacher training program, right?
Mm.
A little long, thing, which I thought, was a little overwhelming at first. And but I went ahead and I did it. And that 8 months of doing yoga every day and then meeting with the group like every weekend a month was it gave me time to learn and then digest, and then it also gave me time to myself and my own practice, right? Because we were required to practice 5 days a week and then journal about each one. um, and I looked back later and read my journals, and I didn't reveal anything. Like that's how
Really?
closed off I was to the world. Now I talk about everything, but in my journal of my own writing, like I would just write randomness, and even though I knew what was going on and I would feel these emotions and all these thoughts arise, I would didn't want anybody to know about them. I was very secretive and didn't write it in my journal, which now I wish I would have, but unfortunately I didn't.
Yeah, can't really go back and recreate that.
No, not at all. I got into yoga, and a couple months into my yoga teacher training, I literally looked at my family and I was like, I'm sorry. Like everything that I've said to you over the past 2 years, like I don't think that was me. So I don't want you to believe anything that I've given to you over the past 2 years. I was like, I have a whole new perspective on everything, life. I was like, whatever that person was after leaving the Marine Corps, I didn't know that person. I knew who I was when I was in the Marine Corps, but that person in between, I had no idea who he was or what he was doing. He was just crazy. He acted out all the time, and I guess we call him post-traumatic stress, outburst or whatever. But that was, I got into that yoga, and it enlightened a different part of who I was, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Nicholas, I'm curious, where do you think, if you wouldn't have ever found Blaine and Team Red, White, and Blue, and you wouldn't have found out about Exalted Warrior Foundation, you would have never got plugged in, where do you think you would be today?
I tell people all the time that if I hadn't found yoga, I'd be dead, because there's no doubt in my mind that eventually I would have pulled the trigger, and I didn't have the patience to wait on medical care, and I wasn't a big fan of doctors to begin with because I don't like treating symptoms. I like treating, curing problems, right? So
Right.
I know that I would have just made the decision that, I couldn't put up with the pain anymore, and I would have just, made that call.
Wow.
And I really know I would have. That's why I love yoga so much, is because when you know that that's where you would have been.
And if you take that even farther than that, I mean, obviously yoga saved your life. I mean, you can honestly say that yoga saved your life. But aside from that, think about all of the people that you are helping with yoga now, and how many lives you inadvertently are saving as well. And you might not even know it, just like you kind of kept things hidden, what was going on in your backstory all of this time. There's people who could be taking your yoga class who, might be coming to the class reluctantly like you did, and they might have those same feelings, and you could be turning their life around just like your life was turned around. So it's not just your life that was saved. It's probably exponentially how many lives were saved with that.
Well, I hope so, because I really love what I do. I teach full time, yoga teacher for Exalted Warrior. I love teaching. I love meeting new veterans, and I love seeing people come back to yoga. It's tough to come back to something that's so opening and uncomfortable and different than anything. We're not used to that. We're not used to putting ourselves into uncomfortable situations on a day-to-day basis. But when I get to see the veteran come back to yoga, like that's why I keep coming back, because they keep coming back. And as long as I have students that keep coming back, I'll be there to teach. So
nice. And I also am a big fan of yoga, and I was originally starting to test it out and try it because I was not very flexible, and I'm still I'm almost able to touch my toes is where I am. And I'm pretty athletic, but I'm not quite there yet. And but I was doing yoga specifically for that. And then what I found while I was doing it and while I was hearing the teachers talking about it, and I had a couple people from the Veterans Yoga Project on, and they were talking about it, and come to find out it's the breathing that is the big benefit. And it was something that not only was I not paying attention to it, but I was doing it completely wrong. And when I was trying to do the movements, I was holding my breath the whole time. So I wasn't even getting that benefit that that you're supposed to be getting from yoga.
I literally I sit everybody down right off the bat, and I say, as we find our breath, and I introduce what Ujjayi breath is, because sometimes I have new students, or sometimes the TBI factor, some people may forget a couple things, right? So I like to reiterate the most important part, right? Your breath. So, and I always say, I'm like, if we just sat here the rest of the time and just focused on our breath and breathed, we would have practiced yoga. And I think I know people in their heads are like, what are you talking about? But if all we did was sit and breathe, we would have practiced the art of yoga, right? That's yoga, right? The movements are just one pillar of yoga. And we love those because those help reduce our pain and our anxiety and help us feel better throughout the day. But this stuff just doesn't happen overnight. You can't just go to one yoga class and expect to feel so much better the next day. Actually, most of the time when you go to a yoga class, you're going to feel sore.
Right.
You're going to feel, I always joke in class, anytime I see people sweating, I'm like, who said yoga was easy? And usually get a nice laugh out of it, because, you're sweating, you're hurting. It's a lot of physical strength that comes from
your
yoga.
arms are shaking. Yeah. That's a full
you
workout.
Gotta love the shakes. Yeah. So, people, I remember my mom came to her first yoga class, and she overdid it, right? So she tried to do everything and push herself through everything, which she shouldn't have done. She should have been more mindful. And she knows that, right? She should have just done what she could do and not pushed herself past that point. But she literally pushed herself the whole time. And, and then she was like, the next day, she's like, I couldn't get out of bed. And she's like, I was so sore. My body hurt so bad. And again, it makes you not want to go back to yoga.
Right.
But then you see everybody else, like my mom sees me, her son, and she's like, it's helped him so much that, I need to go back and do yoga. Like, if it can help him, then, it can help me, regardless of age, regardless of your flexibility. You just got to keep going. You got to keep doing more yoga. The more yoga you do, the easier it gets. And then the more yoga that you do, then you don't want to do other things, right? You want to go and do more yoga.
Right.
Because you just that experience, that meditative state throughout your practice, that that feeling that you get when you're like lifted as you leave a yoga practice is a good way to express it. You just lifted from, you know, the physical aspect of your body, and all the pain and discomfort is gone, and you're above your body and your head. So you don't feel those. That's what drew me into yoga, was that as I left practice, I didn't have any pain because my mind was just free and clear of those pain signals shooting all over the place.
Wow. And
You know,
were you able to reduce your medications?
I was actually today. I don't take any pain pills.
None at all.
And I haven't taken pain pills probably for, 2 years. I've been completely pill free. I haven't refilled any prescriptions. Um, I haven't gone to any pain management clinics. I haven't had any back spasms. I haven't had any discomfort realistically anywhere. And if I do feel a little bit of discomfort arising, because, I do physical work, I was worked as a renewable energy tech for a little while, installing solar panels on a rooftop, right? So
Oh, wow.
my hamstrings would get like super tight, and I would feel that tightness and be like, oh, if I don't stretch that out, I know I'm gonna have a back spasm. So then I would go do more yoga, and then I would be fine and never have that back spasm, right? So, anytime you feel like that overwhelming aspect of your life, you just come back to our yoga. So like, I need to just go take a break and sit with this for a minute. I need to go breathe. I need to create that space between me and that situation, and so I can look at it objectively instead of emotionally.
Yeah.
And that's what yoga is for, right? To help us calm those fluctuations of our mind.
Absolutely. So let me ask you one last thing before we get going here, Nicholas.
Sure.
Can you give just a parting piece of advice for any veterans who they might be going through dark times or might not have the direction that they need like right now? What advice would you give to them?
If you're where I was, in the bottle and down the barrel, I would have to say that you should find some peace with yourself. And that comes through many different avenues of approach. Obviously, my favorite avenue of approach is yoga, but you can explore more balance in your life. You can do runs, you can do going to the gym, you can do yoga, you can do all of these all together. Find that balance, because doing one thing over and over again is not going to fix everything, right? You have to reach out in multiple different places and pull all the tools that you need from many different sources. Team Red, White, and Blue, Exalted Warrior. As we go across the country, we know yoga teachers all over the nation that we can get you in touch with to help you through modifications of yoga postures, so you can feel the same benefit, even though you can't get into the full expression. We'll modify that so you can still feel that same attribute that pose gives you, and relief that it gives you. Find some meditation, find some breath, and when you find those things, then be kind to yourself about it. Love yourself. Know that if you're kind to yourself, then naturally you're going to be kind to other people. And as long as you love yourself, other people are going to be surrounded by your love because you love yourself. And you see that every day. You see everybody will tell you, oh, look at that person. He's so happy. I love hanging out with him. He's so great. Right? Like, you can be that person, but that person loves themselves. That person is kind to themselves. They don't look in the mirror and say, oh man, I'm fat. I look in the mirror sometimes and I'm like, man, I'm bloated today. But that's not being kind to ourselves, right? We have to be sincere to ourselves and know that where we are today is where we need to be. And we can change it, but it takes one day at a time, one moment at a time.
Absolutely. Well,
there's a lot of time left, so it's worth it.
Awesome advice, Nicholas. Thank you so much for that, and thank you for coming on the show and sharing your story. I know that sharing your story sometimes is really great, and sometimes it's not very easy. And I thank you so much on behalf of all of the listeners out there for sharing with us today.
Thanks, Jeremy. And my story is usually never easy, especially going back and talking about, the secrets that I held to myself. But I shared with you the link, that tells my whole written story that I wrote. And that talks about pretty much all the same stuff that I talked about today. So, if anybody's interested in reading that, they can too as well.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And when I get down to Tampa, hopefully in the next couple of months, I'm going to have to come and check out the yoga down there.
Definitely, Jeremy. I'll make sure I take it easy on you.
Yeah, please do. All right. You have a great night.
You too, Jeremy.
I hope that all of you out there got as much out of this interview as I did. There was so much great information that Nicholas shared, and it couldn't have been easy for him to share his backstory like that. And I'm so thankful that he came on here and did. And one of the things that I took out of his story that I just want to go back to is he was saying that there were many nights where he sat with a drink in one hand and a 45 in the other. And there might be some of you out there who know somebody who's in this situation. There might even be some of you that are listening who are in this same place that he was when he was telling the story. And if you are, if this is speaking to you, I want you to go back and listen to the tail end of the interview again, because we talk about how when Nicholas was able to pull himself out of this, and he got plugged in with Team Red, White, and Blue, and he got plugged in with Exalted Warriors, and he got plugged in with yoga, he was able to take himself to a place where he's not on any medications anymore. He's completely off all the pain medications. You could hear in his voice, he's at peace with himself. Not only did Nicholas save himself through all of this, but everybody else that he is touching from this point forward, he's also saving them. What I'm trying to say is, you might not even realize this, but there's people in your future that you might not even have met yet who are absolutely counting on you. So please get plugged in with an organization. It doesn't need to be yoga. Yoga worked for Nicholas, but there's thousands of organizations out there. Find one that fits what it is that speaks to you and get plugged in. That's all I got for you today. Make sure you listen to tomorrow's episode, where I'm going to be talking about what I learned after interviewing 50 nonprofit organizations. All right, I'll see you in episode 59.